So when you find out that your best friend, the person that you have lived with for the last 20 plus years, the person who knows you better than anyone else on the planet, the person that you have dedicated your heart and soul, all of your resources, your commitment, everything to, you've been there through thick and thin, you've helped her with everything you can imagine. You have been the best possible husband that you could be. You held nothing back. You're all in. And she decides one day that she's not happy and that she thinks that she could do better on her own. Really, the person who knows you best in the world is telling you in not so many words that they really don't like you that much anymore, you know? And the impact of that on your psyche, especially when it just happens, right after it happens, man, that gets in your head. It gets in your head in a big way. So 5 years ago, my wife left, and 5 years from Sunday coming up was my birthday. And I had that first birthday without her in it. And it was, you know, one of those moments of revelation. My daughters and my son did a great job of throwing me a little party, and we had a great time. I don't know how much she would have added to the party, quite honestly. And I think that was my first clue that maybe life was going to be okay without her in it. So I like to think of it as a rebirth day as opposed to a birthday. Because it was on that day that I got the first little inkling that I really didn't need to have her around anymore. And that family events were still going to happen. That kids were still going to be there. I was still there. And we could still have a good time. Now it took a very long time before that whole thought kind of matured into the concept of a rebirth day. But that was the first moment that I realized it. I think the critical element for me was not isolating, was I still had other people in my life. I had clients that I considered my friends who came to see me all the time. And just having that social contact, I think, makes a huge difference. My kids, of course, that's enormous. You know, I can't even begin to tell you how critical that was to my mental health. When I hear some guys use the word simp in a sentence to describe a man who has, in some way, given his soul over to a woman, I kind of know what they're talking about, but I'm not sure if they know what they're talking about. If you've ever been in a real, intimate relationship for a long period of time, like in a marriage, with a woman, there's almost no way that you can avoid falling into that category. And I know that young guys like to throw that term around to describe, you know, their peers who, you know, kind of bend over backwards to accommodate their girlfriends. But if you're going to get married, you got to go all in. Like there's no halfways. You can't just commit a little bit. I mean, if you're going to take that step and you're going to actually marry a woman, you've got to be fully dedicated to that relationship, or it will blow up in your face. That's the only way that you stand any chance of it working. Now, from the outside, from an inexperienced eye, from some guy who's never really had an intimate relationship with a woman for an extended period of time, that may come across as simping. But the truth of the matter is, it's just a guy giving his heart and soul to a commitment that he made. And the truth is, it's like to the bold go the spoils. You've got to go all in. If you don't go all in, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, how you handle that relationship from that point forward obviously is a matter of debate. But for me, I was all in. I gave my full trust, loyalty, commitment, money, everything that I had to making sure that marriage worked. I think I gave my wife just about everything any woman could possibly want. Financial support, emotional support, psychological support, even physical support when she decided that she wanted to go back to work we had a live-in nanny for like 3 years. So I do have the sense that even though our marriage ended and she was unhappy in the end, that I have nothing to be ashamed of. Like I didn't do anything that any rational person would say, well, there you go, John, that's what you should have done, or that's what you didn't do. Like, no, I gave it all. I was all in. And so when guys start talking about that whole simp thing, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, if you're going to do something, if you're going to push forward on some path in your life, especially a major one like marriage, you've got to go all in. If you're not going all in, if you're cheating the game a little bit, yeah, you get what you get. You're going to lose. There's no question about it. Now, I did lose, and I went all in, but I have a clear conscience. There's not a single atom in my body that thinks I could have done anything better than I did. So with that clear conscience, I can look my kids in the face and say, hey, I tried my best. I can look at my ex-wife and say, I did my best. And there is no question about it. No one doubts that for a minute. No alcohol, no drugs, no screaming, no yelling, no nothing. Gave it all. So if that means I'm a simp, then I'll own it. I'll own it. But I've got a clear conscience. So when you get into a serious relationship, a marriage, especially if you've got children, there's no way around not giving up a part of yourself. You have to go and adapt to the role that you are taking on. As men, we don't have a lot of experience raising kids, and so that whole role of being a father is something that we have to kind of learn. And in order to learn that, you're probably going to have to tweak your personality a little bit. You know, these are not your friends, these are your kids, and it's a different kind of relationship. And then working with your wife while you're going through that requires some tweaking of your personality as well, or the way you approach problems, the way you deal with things. And so, yeah, you're going to lose a bit of yourself. And as that goes longer and longer and longer, you lose just a little more of who you were before you got married. And you find yourself transitioning into someone else, someone new. Now, if you layer that with a bad marriage on top of it, so you can tell your sweetie's not happy with you anymore, and you try to figure out what it is, you're trying to help, you're trying to find an answer. What can you do differently? How can you adjust your approach so that she feels a little bit better? And of course, that's your first mistake because you can't change the way she feels. But inevitably, most guys try, just because men try to fix stuff. That's what we do. So here's some advice for guys that are going through it right now, who are in the thick of the shit. You got that heavy feeling in your chest, you can't breathe, you can't sleep at night, not sure what you're gonna eat, your house looks like a tornado hit it, if you even have a house anymore. Maybe you're living in an apartment, you've got a mattress on the floor. So here's what you gotta do. Number one is you've got to reach out to friends and family. You got to get around some people. If you spend all this time alone, you're gonna start focusing on all that negative crap, and it's gonna spiral fast. It's not gonna be good. So you need to get your head out of that space, and you need to start thinking about your future. I would start, hate to use the term journaling, but at least making some notes for yourself in terms of what you want for yourself. You know, just what are the things that you used to dream about before this relationship started? Make some notes about what do you think you gave up of yourself during the relationship. Think about how your personality changed. Remember who you were before this whole thing started. That guy's still in there, you know? You need to get that guy out and bring him up to date. So if it's been 20 years, that premarital version of you, he's there, he's just waiting for you to wake him up. And obviously, you've had a lot of experience since then. So this old version of you that meets the new version of you is going to be way better than the old version was. Hopefully won't make any more of the same mistakes. you got to realize that on some level, you did sell out some aspect of yourself for the purpose of maintaining this relationship. And you're going to have to figure out what that was and see if you can reclaim it, because you're going to need that later. You're going to need those aspects of you that you set aside in order to accommodate this relationship. And when you do reclaim those aspects of you, I'm talking about I don't want to sound too masculine here, but yeah, your masculinity, that aspect of you that is what makes you a man, there's a lot of old jokes about how women carry around men's balls in their purse. Well, there's a little truth to that. I mean, we do sort of set aside some of that masculine energy for fear of freaking out our wives by losing our temper or putting a hole in a wall or something like that, because you don't want to be that guy, So you set it aside, you push it down, you try not to get upset, you try not to get enraged. Not that I'm suggesting that you need to have that going on now, but the source of that energy is powerful and you need to reclaim it. You need to control it, but you need to reclaim it. The next thing you need to do is you need to reevaluate your entire life. You need to decide what your priorities are, because for the last decade or two or three, you've had shared priorities, or maybe you've been working on her priorities, and you need to figure out what your priorities are. And you need to do some real deep thinking on that, because it may not come naturally to you. You've been sharing all these big decisions. Now it's time for you to make some decisions on your own and figure out which ones are the most important. You've got to figure out what your values are now. Obviously, you've gone through this traumatic experience, and it's trauma, and a lot of guys claim to have PTSD, and I definitely see how you could experience that. It is definitely a traumatic experience when the number one person in your life tells you that you're no longer welcome. So you got to come to terms with that. If you got to get a counselor, you got to see a therapist, whatever, you should do it, because you don't need to carry that shit around with you. You need to get it out. You need to get it off your back, get it away from you. Probably the most important thing that I did in the middle of all that was getting out for these walks every day. Getting into nature and just walking for hours and hours and hours. I would walk until my feet hurt. I would walk until the dogs were done. They would just be laying on the ground, like I would need to let them rest before we could go home. I would just walk, and I would lift. Exercise was always my shelter, like the place I could go, my oasis. That's where I could find peace. Because when you're lifting heavy weights over your head, you're not thinking about anything else except not dropping the weights on your head. If you're doing heavy squats, all you're thinking about is, I don't want this shit to fall on me. And although that's kind of funny in a way, it's so therapeutic when you can just clear your head of everything else in your life and just focus on doing one thing. And you like lifting weights, and when you're pushing something heavy, you're not worried about your taxes, you're not thinking about your ex-wife, you're not thinking about your kids, you're not thinking about your own mortality or the existential threats to humanity. All you're thinking about is pushing that fucking weight as hard as you can so that it doesn't fall on you. And that, oh my God, talk about therapy, that is some serious therapy right there. Because not only do you get the experience of focusing your mind, but the physiological effect on your body, the muscles and the sympathetic nervous system, the whole 9 yards, is just unreal. So I would strongly recommend you get into the gym. First of all, you're gonna feel better, and secondly, you're gonna look better. So absolutely do that. Start building your life around making yourself into a better man. If you can do that, you've got a new hobby. All you're doing is just making yourself better every day. You're not looking back, you're not thinking about the past, you're just looking forward, and you're thinking about who you're going to be and what you're going to do. And there are something like 4+ billion women on this planet. And I know that some of these guys in the comments will say, oh, they all suck. No, they don't. There's some good ones out there. There's some great ones out there. And I enjoy the company of a woman. I enjoy, I sleep with my dogs, but You know, there's something nice about sleeping with a woman. There's something nice about having that smooth skin up against your body. And I don't want to give that up for the rest of my life. I'm not ready for that. I am not ready for that. I am not giving up sex just because I had a bad marriage. So don't, you know, but just be cautious as you get back into the game, because you definitely don't want to go in playing from the same position you were in before you got into this marriage, because you're going to get the same results. I think I talked about that in another video, but yeah, if you're the same guy that you were 20 years ago, you're going to do exactly the same thing, and you're going to be in the same place, you know, 5 years from now or 10 years from now or even 6 months from now. You don't want to have that experience. Come on, Shelby. You know, in a previous video, I think I mentioned forgiveness and how you got to forgive her. And you do, you definitely do. Forgiving her in your head, not for her sake, just for your sake. Just so you're not carrying around all that shitty energy with you. But you got to forgive yourself. And that's the toughest thing, because you're the guy that fucked up, right? I mean, you're the one that got yourself into this mess. So you got to forgive yourself. You just got to come to terms with the fact that you are just making decisions that you think are in your best interest, and you made a mistake. And you got to just let it go. You got to let it go. Learn from it. You got to absolutely learn from it. But you can't beat yourself up for the rest of your life just because you screwed the pooch on this marriage. When you go back to that time, like I do, I go back to the time when I met my wife, and I was ecstatic. I mean, I was on cloud nine. She was hot. She liked to fuck. She was fun. We had a lot in common. And I wouldn't have changed a thing. And even today, knowing how everything turned out, man, it almost seems like the whole thing has been divinely orchestrated. I had a lot of fun with her. I learned a lot. We had some wonderful kids. She decided on her own to leave. Didn't cost me a ton of money. Cost me a lot of emotional energy. But then my life got better. Like when things were done, it was done, and she left. And yeah, and I'm way better now than I was then. I mean, financially, physically, intellectually, emotionally. Yeah, my life is so much better. So changing your perspective and appreciating things is kind of a talent or a skill that most people have never developed. And I want to give you an example of how it manifests in my life, because I'm going through some very difficult times in my family, but it's also been some of the best times of my life. So my mom has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease about the same time that my wife left, about 5 years ago. And my mom, you know, if you've watched any of my other videos, was a pretty high flyer, very successful woman in her own right. And she's been fearing this Alzheimer's diagnosis for a long time because her father died from it. So it's something that I think she had a premonition that this might be coming for her, and it did. From that point, from that diagnosis time, she has prioritized my daughters and her family relationships above all other things, which is a huge departure from where she was before, because she had just grown a multi-million-dollar business from scratch for 40 years. And for her to suddenly prioritize family in that manner was a blessing. It was an opportunity for her to get to know my kids like she never could have otherwise. And for the last 5 years, we've seen her just slowly move closer and closer to the advanced stages. And she's very close to the advanced stages of Alzheimer's now. She has almost no memory at all. But these last 5 years have been priceless. They've been priceless. Now, many people will get caught up in the sadness of this event, you know, of her disease and the fact that she's going to die from it. And that's true. I mean, very sad that she's going to pass away. Probably she has less than a year left, I would guess. But we're all going to die. I mean, that's just the way things go. You know, that's just the way life is. We all die. The difference with her is she knows how she's going to die, and she's got a pretty good idea when she's going to die. And so with that knowledge in her mind 5 years ago, she made a conscious decision to prioritize the things that she felt were most important to her. Anyway, that decision was so beneficial to everyone in my family, across the board. And I appreciate it because it's, like I said, priceless. So you can focus on the shit. You can look at the world and see all the darkness. Or you can step back and you can find the light. It's there. It's there. All you got to do is look for it. You've got to take hold of your happiness. You've got to take responsibility for it. You've got to own it, because if you don't, no one else will, no one else can. And for you guys that are going through a divorce right now and you're in that separation point, same thing applies to you. Yeah, you can look at the situation and get all bummed about it. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can look at and be angry, upset, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's your life, and you got to decide what you're going to do with it. And you can sit around and bemoan the fact that something went wrong in the past, and you can get yourself hung up on the idea that you're a failure, or you can get out there and decide who you are, what kind of a man you decide to be, and what's meaningful to you, what's going to give your life meaning. You have a free chance to do that now, so just do it. There's no reason not to. All right, you guys, that's what I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and stay healthy, and if you can, stay single. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.